Other organizations joined in, some for pure research reasons, like universities, some just to be there and to get out the knowledge and not they didn't contribute very much. A number of consultancies paid only 100,000 or 200,000 euros, and in the old days they would have been kept out because they are free riders. They just want that knowledge and they don't really wish to pay for it. But we changed that, like in the way I told you earlier, and even the industry says, well, it's okay, let them come. The world's a large place, there's a lot of areas where we can do our work. We don't have to be in each other's way. And even if they're not contributing now, they might contribute later. And even they have a practice to build up, and we can learn from that. So the strength here is not in developing the knowledge. The strength here is being the first to develop the knowledge and be upfront and be the first to sell the solution. So you're the one they're going to ask later on. And also the water boards, which is an independent functional sort of government in the Netherlands with its own democracy and its own taxing system, joined the research. Everybody chucks in, everybody pays, some in cash, some in people, some in data, for instance. The Port of Rotterdam brought in a couple of million euros data in the monitoring of the harbour area, which is considered to be a contribution to the funding of the organization. Well, we've done that for 5 years, and there's only one test to know if it is successful. That's if the private companies say it is successful, and they want to go on for the next phase. So we think it worked. It's worthwhile, and it's just an example that if you have trust, if you're willing to accept certain risks, like these free riders, if you're willing to accept that not all your money is coming back in 1 or 2 years, if you're willing to share with other people, then you can run a program like this and get more out of it for everybody. I want to mention one more thing, that is one of the problems we share, the Netherlands and Australia, is that there's a tension between the reality of the different parties involved. And these are not always threatening. You don't have to worry about all of them, but there's a tension between the traditional research, say the universities, and demand-driven research. There's a large adversity in the blue sky researchers from applied research, and we have to change that. We have to bridge that divide in some way. We have to find ways to make it logical for blue sky researchers to be involved in things that are very applicable, interesting, nice to do. That's it. Without changing their behavior or their research in itself. So that seems an impossible situation, but we are all very clever people. If only us, like we're sitting here in this room, would really apply ourselves to the subject, it would be solved. And the last is one that's universal, but it's in Australia and it's in the Netherlands at least. That is that staffing of government is constantly changing. Organizations, agencies are constantly changing, and you need a certain stability in relationships to be able to develop what I just described. So that's one of the risks we really perceive as a serious risk. There's one solution. I don't know if that applies to Australia, but in the Netherlands, all these civil servants changing all the time. I said I was a civil servant for 30 years. I changed jobs every 2 or 3 years. 3 was a long time. But they still stay 30 years. So they rotate back, and if you're long enough at it, you tend to meet the same people again, and you can use them again in another role. So that's a word of comfort after all the sorrows I shared with you. Thank you.
I thought there's a lovely, very encouraging theme throughout your talk between demand-driven applied research on one hand and long-termism on the other. I think I even heard you mention 8 to 16 years type of thing.
Yeah.
Now this is something which we're not used to hearing. particularly this evil era of short-termism. But I was very encouraged that here's a program unequivocally applied, closer to the market, and yet still long-term, because that's what you find.
Yes.
You determine what does happen versus what can happen. And that's a very encouraging theme. Any hot buttons you pushed in government to get them thinking that way?
Well, we did, of course, but they only work short term, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
But we changed something in our own thinking as well, because we used to think that long-term research had to start at date one and had to go on with the same description, the same aims and goals for a long time. What we're doing now is we have a research line, and well, we have lots of research projects, and we try to fit them into this line. And it might be that there's a period of 1 year or 2 years that you have no research at all in that line. But the year after that there could be no new project, and you could fit it in. So the researchers themselves would have 2 years that they were working on other lines, but they would still be present over a longer period. Research lines filled with different projects, different
Program.
yeah.
Yeah, understood.
And
So it wasn't just a matter of government changing their
yes.
philosophy, it's actually
Yes.
researchers.
Yes,
also
the important thing is
realising-
don't think in plans, think in people.
Yeah.
Because the knowledge is in the heads of the people. So that's why if you want to make this golden triangle a success, you have to exchange people.
Yeah. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, thank you.
What is your funding model in the universities and these other research institutions that allow people to be maintained for those long periods? Because here we have a lot of grant funding, meaning that they're quite short-term projects. They might only be 2 or 3 years at best for, say, postdocs or researcher at the university. But how do you fund them so that people can stay for a long period?
Well, our total turnover, Deltaris, total turnover is about 110 million a year, and about 10 million is subsidized by the government. And this is the demand-driven research I talked about. So these 10 millions are aimed at a period of 3 to 6 years. So there's a renewal of 20% or something every year. And this is a budget that's declining. The rest of the turnover is financed in other ways. So we have about 30 million, 30, 40 commissioned by the government. But this is all aimed at specific policies or specific programs. So that's for them, it's not for us that we're doing the work. So this work we fit into these research lines so that we can have people working on the same things over a longer period. It's not the government that's trying to fit it in our research programs. And the rest of the money is well earned, you might say, on the market. We don't compete on the market with private companies. In general, not in the Netherlands anyway, and abroad in general we don't do that either. Because we're very arrogant, we say if you can do it, we don't do it. And that's an acceptable way of dividing the work. That's something everybody understands. So if they say, well, you shouldn't be here because I can do that as well, we have a talk about whether that's true. And if it's true, we'll help them, but we won't compete with them. So this part we earn on the market, that's a large part of that is just different levels of government in the Netherlands itself. But also all commissioned work, all work they need, not them paying us for what we need. So you need a sort of turnaround about when you think about subsidies. Subsidies is a bit, well, I used to spend a lot of money. I was very successful in handing out subsidies, but now when I'm a bit later and more sensible, I think I'm a bit older and sensible, I think you should stop thinking about money because it's enslaving. It aims you at the provider of the subsidies. It aims you at bureaucracy, reports, all the things you do not want to be aimed at. So if the government wants to subsidize your work, okay, fine, but it's your work they're subsidizing. And if they want their work to be done, they have to pay for it, like everybody else. So that creates a more adult relationship between parties.
work out where we sit, Harry. We're water, you know, if we're water businesses, and you mentioned water boards. And I know we're not in the knowledge component of that triangle. Are your water boards in the government part or the private sector part?
Well, we see them as government. But the situation in the Netherlands is we have a central government, then we have local authorities, provinces, water boards. They all have their own democracy, they all have their own tax system, but the tax system of the local authorities and the provinces is very small. Most of the money they get from the government, so there's a large influence between the government and the other two. The water boards are apart. They are functional government. They're just there for the water safety in our country, the flood security and water quality. And they are not what they do. Their policies are not determined by the central government.
And, so
and the water board, the utilities are in effect private companies owned by local authorities and provinces.
And so how do they feed into all the decision making about the research?
Well, the water utilities have their own research organization.
Is that like Smart Water Fund for us?
Yes, yes. And they spend about 8 million euros a year on that institute where they do the research. And that institute is, like us, it's private in itself. They do work for others as well, but they have an 8 million chunk of work they do for the utilities.
Harry, a lot of good ideas do start in the shower in the morning, okay? Just as simply an idea, and as it progresses, it goes through a process, and at the end of that process, a very disciplined business case. How much money, time, and effort do you allocate in turning that idea into a program of work? Up at the start of the idea, how much time and effort would you put into the development of the business case? Because it's easy to kill ideas at the start, and which can be very dangerous as well.
Well, we operate as a private company, so I don't let researchers develop and sell ideas. Mm-hmm. They do research because they have to earn money.
But what if that idea is...
So the ideas, sorry to interrupt you, but so the ideas are developed and changed and evolved and sold by management layer, because they're overhead anyway. So I do a lot of that sort of work myself. And the same goes for the other participants. So as long as it's just an idea, the representatives of the private companies are not going to talk with their people at home. They just don't even start. They only start talking when it's a concrete idea that they can sell and that they can convince the people that it's going to work. Now, we are a bit different. We are a bit more on the public, the government side, so we tend to involve more people in the thinking process. But in essence, it's the same thing. So a limited number of people who know their companies, who know the world around them, who know the drivers of the different companies, they must do the thinking and developing and convincing people, and only then it's communicated to the rest of the organizations.
Okay, thank you. Another question.
Harry, you talked a lot about, well, when you look at that triangle between government, private sector and research, they all have very different drivers. And you've talked a lot about the research sector meeting the needs of private sector or government. Are there changes on private sector and government ends, changes in mindset that help make this triangle work better?
Yes, absolutely. So the position we now have in relation to the private sector is totally different from what it used to be. Like I told you, we used to be seen as competitors, now we're seen as contributors. And there have been a number of projects that have been successful and that work this way. For instance, there was a flood in Azerbaijan a couple of years ago. The Minister of Emergency Situations, don't laugh, that's really what it's called. the second most important man in the country. So the Minister of Emergency Situations went to our ambassador, the ambassador went to the ministry went to us, we went back and we organized things, and now a number of Dutch companies are working there, we are working there, even the dredgers start to come in, so there's a sort of camel nose diplomatic diplomacy involved, economic diplomacy involved. And this is not not a charm, it doesn't always work, but it is a way to start to work in a country and to organize things. So you want to be able to tell a government or an organization in another country that you are able to solve the problem and you have the capacity behind you, if necessary, if they want it, to make it real. And when the first contributors have a good contribution and the quality is high, they tend to get the others too. But this doesn't work if I don't know them, and if they don't, I'm not willing to stay behind me in the first phase, because if we're all going there at the same time, there's only one ball, so that won't work. I don't have to explain that to you football fans.
Okay, any other questions? No, I don't think there are. So Harry, we've got a small and again, thank you very much indeed for your presentation.